You probably already know that Filipinos, talking about Filipinos and the islands, mostly talk using their bodies. This is not to say that we don't talk. We love to verbally tell stories, but we also heavily communicate using our bodies. I'll show you a few different ways that it might be your mom, your dad, even your partner, your Filipina partner, and how they're communicating. And probably it's hard for you to get what they're saying. But if you are with other Filipinos in the islands, they usually understand these types of communication using your body, your face. So I'm going to focus on the face. So the first one is we always say before I get there's that makuha ka sa tingin, to get the message by me just looking at you. Have you heard of that phrase before? Usually parents use that for children. Like when we're in the party, makuha ka sa tingin. Basically, know what I mean by just me eyeing on you, looking at you. So we have that sort of framework. Here's the first one. My non-Filipino husband rarely gets this, and it's usually I use it when I want to talk about my one of my kids, but I don't want them to know, so I want him to come closer. So I'll go like this. Basically, what that means, come over here, come over here. He rarely gets that. I actually don't even remember when he got the message. I have to tell him a little bit of a verbal or like even use my hand a bit. But it's like, and if you're Filipino, there could be different interpretation for that. But usually it's like, come over here. So that's the first one. The second one is there's a little bit of a sound if you are your mom can do this or your spouse, you did something you weren't supposed to do, they'll usually just shake their head and go, basically, don't do that. Can't believe you did that. So that's the second one. You know, the sound, it is said that there's a tribe in also in Africa, in which when they're hunting, the echoing, so that animals could not really hear that there are basically humans that are trying to capture them. There's something about that sound in which it doesn't bounce easily to the hearing or to the auditory perception of animals. And so some tribes even use that type of languaging. We are people of nature and of the sea and of the land. So, as someone who is a student of cultural anthropology, I'm always so fascinated by that. So that's the second one. The uh, next is if somebody's upset with you, maybe your dad is upset with you and you start talking to him, but you don't get why he's upset, he might look down. And you might notice that there's a stiffening in the jaw, like this. Almost like you could see it moving, and it's a connotation, usually. So when I'm sharing this, I'm not saying that's all the meaning. There are various meanings, but it can mean one of my explanation. But this one, usually I observe when somebody's upset, they look down and they kind of have a harder jaw. And sometimes you could see the jaw kind of moving. So that's the third one. The fourth one is if somebody starts breathing heavily, like, I mean, that might be across culture, but we do that also quite a bit if we don't want to use our language, but instead rather use our bodily signal to a person that we care about and we want them to know that we're upset. So we might use that. And then if you do a frown, so we say simangot, that combination. And so if you ask somebody, galit ka ba? Are you mad? They'll look at you like you're, can't you get it? You know? So there is a term for that. If you haven't discovered, I wrote this ebook. It's called Five Pinoy Love Languages. I will share the link. It's basically the basic way that Filipinos seek and express love. But then I have so many other collections in my blog. And the reason why I wrote this is because there is this difficulty with communication, usually with very traditional Filipinos, their parents, and then the younger ones, or Filipino Americans and their immigrant parents, or just in general, those who were raised in the Philippines, and then if they have family in the diaspora. So the fourth one, the heavy breathing, sometimes when you accompany that with just kind of like, your hands, we call that maktol. Okay. And then the fifth one. So I'm giving you very simple ways to read bodily expression in which the Filipino or a Filipino may not assert themselves verbally. And I hoping by sharing this, I am equipping you with ways to be curious, and whatever your interpretation is might be the interpretation from your own conditioning, from all the culture that you uh, have been raised in. So just be very aware that there might be other interpretation. The last one I'm going to share with you today is heavy handling of things. So the other one's heavy breathing. So if somebody's holding a pen, they kind of just handle it just obviously very heavily handed. And or they're closing the cabinet door, and then they're kind of slamming it a little bit, but they're not saying anything. If you ask them, galit ka ba, are you mad? Hindi, they'll say hindi. But there is an expectation, and the reason why I'm sharing this is that so we could communicate more effectively, the the Filipinos perhaps using more verbal expression so the other could understand. And the other one also understanding that we communicate not just verbally. In fact, we communicate more with our bodies and nonverbal cues to learn also to read that. So we could develop almost like a third language, so that we could understand each other better. The last one, the heavy handling of things, we call that the bog. It could be even you dragging your feet. And usually, if you have a Filipino mother like me, born and raised in the Philippines, we don't appreciate that. So the reason, uh, if you're a Filipino mom, and here's the interesting part. You don't even have to be born and raised in the Philippines, but the Filipino American, they get irritated with mom because the Filipino mom had told them, nagdadabog ka, ayoko yan. But when they have their own children, they notice they have something within them that also gets triggered or irritated. So the point is just to be mindful. The way I work that out with my own children as a psychotherapist, I want my children to be able to express. I tell them that I'm a little sensitive when it comes to this. So I teach them, and I'm also self-aware. So when they're doing that, I'm just not thinking, oh, so disrespectful. Sometimes developmentally, they could be disrespectful, but developmentally, children are just growing and learning. So we want to equip them. So I tell my children, when you need to do something similar to that, please go to your room and you can express, you can write whatever you want. If you need my support, I'll be there. So kind of a way to balance both. What are your tips? How do you work this out? So I gave you 5 different ways. There's so many. If you want me to keep sharing, first of all, I also have the 7 Pinoy love languages. It's a course. I'll link below. There I teach a way to speak to more the immigrant or quote unquote traditional the way Filipinos express themselves. And if you're um, more influenced by the American culture or more um, I don't want to say modern, but contemporary in the way you converse, it gives you a little bit of a lot of support so that you can communicate with the more traditional Filipino way of communicating so that we could all transform, because when we don't learn, what we don't process, what we don't heal, we passed on. And that's the whole point of my, honestly, my channel, my blogging. I hope you appreciate, share some tips. What did you find helpful? Again, this is Roanne Samo, psychotherapist here in California. Ingat lagi. Maraming salamat. Bye.